Yeah, I think when you break it down to I think a lot of people find that walking in faith or they chuck religion, they chuck spirituality, they chuck any of this out because it's too hard to understand. Well, what am I supposed to do? And they think they got to go read an entire book to understand the rules so that they can follow them, which is just such a backwards thought and demotivating thought. I think when you think like Christ, Christian, Christ follower, and that whole like, how do I emulate? What would Jesus do here? And how do I do my best to follow that lead? And I don't think Jesus looked at people and was like, there got to be something wrong with you. Right.
Yep.
I think he looked and he was like, I know what's wrong with you.
Yep.
And there are things right with you. And I can cover the things that are wrong with you.
What's up, Internet? Welcome back to Fringe Faith. Today I am joined with a legend, the the let's see, how should I intro you? The one of the owners of Go Fast Don't Die is how you're most well known, but maybe your most legendary claim to fame is the one of half of the duo of Stony Baloney, as maybe the world should you as. But mostly just a good friend, one of the groomsmen from my wedding. Honestly, a big brother figure to me, and just the legend himself, Brady Mclean. Welcome to the podcast, man.
I'm not half of Stony Baloney. It's funny that whole thing with. Look at this. I'm using a lawnmower as my
I
how
love
to
it.
set the phone. I don't think it's going to work. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Thomas. It's funny because Tony Baloney was obviously started as a lie and became true.
Yep.
And so in my head, it's always like 17 people that are in the band.
Yeah.
When you say half, who
I guess one of three because technically it was you, Rhett, and Amelia,
Amelia played the
the hula
she
hoop.
played the hula hoop.
It's one of my favorite stories. If anybody's curious about that, I talked about it on my friend Jason's podcast. It's a funny
Didn't
story.
you run off?
Huh?
Didn't you run off during?
I had to repair a tire.
I remember it. I
Dude,
was
honestly, it ended up working out really good for me because A, by the time you guys were done, I was ready to roll. We didn't have to stop in town for any longer than that. And B, literally the next year when my bike was broke and Sam and Kelsey dropped me off in that town again, the same guy saved my butt by letting me crash at his place while we waited for the part to arrive. It was awesome.
it's cool how that works.
hmm But anyways, yeah, so today we're talking a little bit about you you posted something in your story recently and it was on the topic of masculinity, and anybody that's listened for a while knows that I this is something that I touch on a little bit but haven't gotten to go too in depth on, and I like your perspective. I like your perspective on it, and most people that know who you are know that you are maybe a little bit antithetical to the hustle culture in some ways, but also, relatively successful at the same time. So in today's culture, obviously the topic of toxic masculinity is thrown around a lot, and oftentimes it's in response to males that are acting, I guess, overly aggressive, or they're peacocking, or um, you know, they're trying to prove themselves or being abusive or in whatever aspect. I guess what I'm curious about is how do you respond when somebody is talking to you about like what toxic masculinity is? Because I know that you have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people. You ask questions on your stories and stuff, and sometimes people respond. So I have a feeling you've probably had this conversation a time or two. So what do you, I guess, what's your take on that idea of toxic masculinity? We can start there.
I had a conversation yesterday on Instagram that ended up being a pretty good one. I had posted so Black Sabbath, I think, just played their last show.
Hmm.
And I had posted something and I said honor the Sabbath, and I posted their song War Pigs um as like a, you know, congratulations Black Sabbath on your last show. Thanks for making metal
Yeah.
this. And someone said, "Hey, do you feel like that's a little blasphemous?" And I said, "That's an interesting thought." I think that I intended to be, I think that I was intentionally provocative. You
Uh-huh.
know, Obviously the word play is provocative, at least for someone who is, um, you know, does observe the Sabbath and considers that an important rhythm of their life.
Hmm.
Um, and I said, and for me, I think that it's a, that it's a reflection of the society that you live in when someone approaches anything with immediate judgment and without curiosity.
True.
And I think when most of the time when I hear the term toxic masculinity, which I sort of feel like we're over, I feel like that kind of had its time, and now there's a lot of people who sort of want a semblance of masculinity back,
Yeah.
you know, and that's how I feel like I've been alive long enough now that when I was younger I was really reactive and I was like, no, it needs to be this way, it needs to be, and I would fight and I would fight and I would fight, and it was almost like telling me as a kid, like, hey, don't play with that thing, you're going to hurt yourself, don't play with that thing, you're going to hurt yourself. And I couldn't hear that. I didn't listen, I didn't care. And the more I would be told not to do something, the more I was gonna do it, right? The
Hmm.
more I wanted to do it. And then I'd hurt myself. And then I'd be like, oh, that's what you meant. Now I understand. And I really think that a lot of those conversations, for me, when they're approached with judgment and not curiosity, my best response is to respond with curiosity.
Yes.
Because um, I think that's loving. I think that love's other name is understanding. And I think that when we pursue understanding, we are acting in love. We're rooting ourselves in the foundation of love. So when I hear someone say like, "Oh, that's toxic masculinity at its finest," or when someone references that, I usually respond with curiosity, but I think when people want to define that thing, toxic masculinity, which to me, like when I hear that, I hear misguided or malevolent strength.
Yeah.
Masculinity to me is sort of strong, not in the sense that, yeah, I think people get masculine and feminine confused with male and female, girls and boys. Like, oh, so a boy is strong, girls aren't strong. And I
Yeah.
think um, I think it's important to talk to nail the distinction there. Um, but what I hear is sort of like, it's almost like there's a gun, and people talk about guns a lot, and we have a conversation about guns more than we have a conversation about culture,
Yes.
more than we have a conversation about gun safety or awareness, firearm, uh, uh,
Hmm.
and understanding of firearms. So if the gun is masculinity, the toxic part is who's wielding it and
Yes.
why, right? So when you run through to the intent of a thing, and I think the toxic masculinity piece has to do with the intent of your strength, the intent of your directive,
Yeah.
the intent of your restraint, the intent of your provision. Like it has to do with the intent of whatever that thing is. And
Mhm.
um I think a lot of times, like people think like most of the time when I hear it, people think like muscles and abs, and
Yep.
it's fine. The little bug crawling on my, it looked like the little bouncy thing. They hear muscles and fighting and all of these things, and the reality is like I spend a lot of time with people with muscles, and I spend a lot of time with people who fight every day. And they have the most healthy masculine presence, and it's a masculine presence that is so,
Gentle.
when you feel it, you feel safe.
Hmm.
Um, Even myself, and not just safe in like they could protect me physically if physical harm was here, but safe in like, man, I can trust these people.
Yes.
And there, like there's a lot of masculine traits that a lot of females also like that, that train in our gym, that they possess. And then they also bring on feminine traits. Like, I feel like, softness and empathy and and maybe an easier, um, place to land. And I just think, man, like, uh, yeah, I think I'm going little off topic in my head, but I
No, yeah.
just think, um, the toxic anything is the intent behind it. And I think when the intent behind it is rooted in insecurity, you kind of have this, this insecurity weapon, this weaponized insecurity. And I think that's what it is, like the gun that's scared. And the gun that's scared is terrifying. And the gun that is certain and precise and objective and discerning is not scary at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's actually a really good thing. Like that's a thing that I feel like is going to protect me. Someone who's making the best decisions, someone who's paying attention to the bigger picture, who has the right intent in their heart. They're not rooting in fear, they're rooting in love. Yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
I've gone
No, you're right.
on and on.
You're right though. Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about that was like the aspect of confidence. A lot of times the insecurity aspect is the reason why people are wielding their strength or whatever in an unhealthy or dangerous way. But I also thought about that Peterson quote, the men should be dangerous, but they should be capable of withholding that danger until it's actually necessary. And another thing that I'm thinking of in association with that is that like wisdom isn't knowing. It's this quote by Marty Solomon. Wisdom isn't knowing what is true; it's when it's true. And I think oftentimes we have to have the wisdom to know, like, okay, this is when I should flex against, somebody that's coming against me in a certain way, and this is when it's appropriate to not, and to recognize the difference between like, hey, that guy's just being insecure. Maybe I don't like engage in the way that he wants me to. I don't swing back on him or something or start a fight or whatever. So I saw a video the other day. It was this guy talking about basically higher testosterone levels. uh, it's associated in culture, and maybe you've seen this. I actually thought of you when I saw this, and maybe I sent it to you at one point. But the guy talks about how,
Some
um,
testosterone level boy. Saw,
exactly.
saw the mustache.
Yep, that brings about at least 10 points of extra testosterone for sure. But
Hold it, I need it.
yep, me dude. I the epidemic of lowered testosterone is a whole other topic, but he was talking about how in culture we tend to think of higher test levels as more aggressive and more likely to fight and such. But he noted that in like I think it was like animal packs that are alpha and so on oriented, he noted that giving like say you've got an alpha, you've got the secondary, and then you've got the like the third and fourth and fifth on the totem pole. If you gave the third more testosterone, they aren't actually going to try to uh, necessarily overcome the those above it in status, but rather will try to keep its place in status. But then he was talking about how that doesn't always end up being in an aggressive way, and he equated giving a bunch of Buddhist monks a bunch of testosterone, and because of the way in which you develop that hierarchy is more of like who can be the most self-sacrificing, who can be the most loving, who can be the most, generous, and you give all of them a bunch of testosterone, then they start to uh, work on being, in their rank or whatever, the best that they can be by being more generous, by being more self-sacrificing and stuff. And I think it's so counterintuitive to what culture thinks of when we think of like higher testosterone levels. But I don't know. I think it's funny because I think about you because your path is so antithetical to most of culture in a lot of ways. But at the same time, you're a jujitsu man, you're a CrossFit man, you're very much into strength things. And I think those are huge for maintaining, both the physical aspect of things, but also like the mental aspect of like becoming that confident person and learning how to um, be empathetic. And then stack the testosterone and the masculinity and stuff on top of that, and you start to actually love people well instead of peacocking on them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thought. My understanding of the functional role of testosterone is that it makes effort feel good.
Yes.
I'm a huge, I've always been, well, actually, that's not true. Back in the way early days, a friend of mine used to listen to lectures by Andrew Huberman.
Hmm.
They were terrible. They were so dry. I was like, dude, I don't even know what he's saying. I'm super not interested. Like, this is the nerdiest stuff ever. That was like back in like 2016. Um, and then in 2020, he started this podcast, and through that podcast, I think he's become much more digestible. But anyway, I'm a huge fan. For a long time, I haven't been because I've got these neck issues, and my sauna just flares it up like crazy. But I sit in the sauna and I do like on Mondays, I listen to Huberman's new podcast because they come out on Mondays. Um, but from my understanding of the role of testosterone is it makes effort feel good.
Hmm.
And so and also my understanding of like people who are peacocking and people who are sort of like um or unnecessarily aggressive, it may probably has to do with more of an imbalance, right? And also, like, I think you see that on both sides. I would say there's probably people out there who are like quote unquote low T type people. Like you look at them and you wouldn't, they're not physically threatening or they're not physically, you know, uh, impressive, I suppose. And
Hmm.
then there are who are like pharmaceutical grade superhero dudes, who are for sure like running, uh, heroic levels of hormones through the exogenous hormones through their body.
Yeah.
And those people are also oftentimes like kind of outrageous. And it's
Yeah.
not so much because they have like, well, I mean, they're basically running nitrous oxide through their car, right? Like
Right.
your car's not supposed to go that fast, but you shoot this in there, that thing will go,
Yep.
right? Not necessarily great for the motor, but it's pretty exciting when you're doing it.
Yep.
And my cousin, when I was a little kid, I remember he was a bodybuilder, and I was a little guy, so like he just looked like Hercules. He looked like the Incredible Hulk to me. I'm like, dude, his arm is the size of my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
You but I remember seeing him crying. He was like drinking and crying, and I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. is he bawling? He's like gets mad and then gets starts crying. And now I've seen that with a number of people who are, let's say abusing or just maybe using the wide world of performance enhancing drugs. And I think, yeah, I think the association with testosterone and aggression is not necessarily accurate. I
Well, and
think
that's why I think what he was trying to articulate was that based on your cultural paradigms and probably also based on how insecure or confident or whatever else and how grounded you are in your own reality and like how happy you are, I'm sure all of that plays a role into it. But what he was saying was like based on your cultural hierarchical standards, that a lot of times will help dictate whether or not you're aggressive because maybe your culture uh, appreciates aggression. Like in a high war society, I would guess, somebody that can fight and kill, that person's going to have a higher honor. Whereas in more of a, like a monk play, like a,
and then
um,
the other, but father, I wish to dance.
right. So I think that's kind of what his idea was, is that, um, real masculinity that's secure and has it doesn't necessarily equate with aggression.
Like it's more of an exposing kind of thing. Like this is
Yes.
exposes kind of who you are more than it is makes you who you are.
Yep.
I think people talk about that with alcohol, which I don't know if I agree, but the idea that like it exposes more of who you are than makes you a different person. Some people are like, "Oh, I'm a different man when I drink," and some people would suggest that like, "No, you're more of yourself when you drink. You're more honest." And I think that's an interesting thing. Yeah, I think all of that. I guess I feel like people um, who are more aggressive are just more rooted in fear. I
Yes.
think probably I don't know this for sure, and I don't have a ton of experience, but I would say if you put all kinds of people all the way across the board with all kinds of different endocrinology, but also like and you lined up their lifestyle or their where they root their worldview, you would find a lot more consistencies in their worldview or their experience than you would in their endocrinology and being like, oh well, there's here this lines up with this lines up with this line. I mean, they might look different, but as far as people being aggressive and people being assertive, either righteously or unnecessarily or inappropriately. Um, yeah, I feel like it has more to do with like where you root your value and where you root like are you rooting in love or are you rooting in fear? Are you rooting in judgment? Are you rooting in curiosity?
Yep.
And I think, like people have a lot of fear. They feel like they don't have enough. They don't have enough, whatever that is, enough respect, enough money, enough food, enough whatever it is. And the wild lie is like, dude, we live in abundance. When you were living in the van, in the shop, outside the shop, whatever, like you lived in abundance. That's the
Hmm.
reality, right? And it's like, dude, I have power. I've got magic water that comes out of the wall. You travel to places and they go, oh, you guys have the magic water. You don't have to go get water every day. And you think about like, yeah, no, no. What do you mean go get water every day? Like, well, if we want to drink water, which we must, we got to go get it.
Yep.
Uh, like we live in, we have these things, right? We can, if I want to talk to Thomas, who's probably in California right now,
Hmm.
uh, we just pop on and do it. Like we're primed, and yet we feel like we don't have enough, whatever, this and that. And the reality is like in a lot of ways, because we have such abundance, we end up like being paralyzed with options. We end up being paralyzed with like so many things. And we end up also paying attention to so many narratives and suggestions about what a life's supposed to look like and be and feel like, um, that we just compare our way out of our own joy. And then you do root in fear because you're like, what if I'm not enough? What if I'm not doing enough? What if I don't have enough? What if I haven't done enough? What if my story sucks? What if whatever? Versus rooting yourself in like, man, I'm rooting yourself in gratitude ultimately is like, and I feel like the word gratitude gets played out a lot. I know I used to scream it from the rooftops all of the time.
Yep.
And now I do less because I feel like people kind of understand. I feel like that word almost got to a point where they're like, okay, dude, not with the gratitude thing anymore. But I just believe it. I think, my worldview is that I don't believe that we deserve our breath. I think that's what started our life, and that was a gift. And everything beyond that has been a gift upon the gift. Um, and
Amen.
so and I have a lot of discussions about that because there are a lot of people who I do think are rooted in love who completely disagree with me. They think you deserve so much, you deserve everything, and I don't think that I think we get kind of hung up on semantics a little bit. Like I don't disagree. I want people to have a beautiful life. I want them to live a story where like when they're on their deathbed, they are smiling. Like, man, I'm really excited to move on to whatever the next thing is, and I'm really happy about how this one went. Not, not because it was without struggle, but because despite the struggle, it was, and maybe even because of the struggle, it was this beautiful, beautiful experience. And I think that's what we're supposed to be doing here. That's what we're supposed to be living here. Yeah.
Definitely.
Where did I start on that?
I think we were talking originally about the testosterone thing, but that basically what you're getting at is, I mean, it's perspective. It's can you have the perspective of like I'm rooted and grounded, and obviously this is more of a faith-based podcast, and I know you and I at least see eye to eye on a decent amount of things, and so. I agree. I tend to lean into the like, yeah, I don't necessarily deserve a lot, and according to my beliefs, I actually deserve worse than I get. And so, um, but because grace is there, and I'm like, okay, so I can be grateful that I have the grace to live today, that I have the grace to get through what's going on in the world or in my day-to-day life or whatever. Like, I mean, I'm getting blessed, it seems like, constantly, even in spite of, getting in a motorcycle accident or, living on next to nothing for however many years I did. It's like you can have the perspective that it's like, oh, I'm still doing that. And I guess this kind of we can kind of move into a little bit the whole hustle culture paradigm because I feel like that's a big thing in culture too. And maybe both of these things are a little bit sort of tapering off and people are realizing on both aspects that, maybe that's not the way to go. But I also wonder, I basically you're the type of guy, you and I try to as well, the type of guy that like is about living life and about experiencing things. And yeah, like if success comes with that, great. But in your bio it says over what is it? Over trying to be successful or something like that.
Making
Oh yeah, that's right. Kind of over making it. And I feel similarly. Like sure, would it be fun to be like would it be nice to be quote unquote worldly successful? Sure, but I'm not worried about it. And so,
Mm,
what do you have to
I don't
speak
even
to that?
I don't even know if I agree with you on that. I think that a lot of people, they're interested in the paycheck, but they're not interested in the work that comes with that. And I
Hmm.
think that there are a million ways to. I think most people, when they think of success, they think of money, fame, and power. I think of alignment with your calling, and I don't think that most of us are called to be rich, famous, or powerful. I just don't think that that is actually our calling. I do think that there are callings for us where that is a byproduct. And I
Yeah.
think the healthiest people that the world looks at and says like, wow, super successful, are not attached to those things at all. It's a byproduct. You don't see that. And sometimes it gets to them, when they find themselves rooting in fear or they sort of move up in status and start comparing themselves to the next link. Like we're all humans. And that happens to a lot of people, but some of the best people that I Um, a lot of people that I look up to who you might, uh, according to those, if those are the grades on the rubric, um, money, fame, power, they have those things because they are a byproduct. It wasn't that they were trying to become
Right.
uh, rich, monetarily rich. They weren't trying to become powerful. They weren't trying to become famous. They became those things because they really aligned. I think it's almost when you truly align with the thing that you're supposed to be, it's almost hard not to become those things.
Hmm.
Because you hit this sort of flow state where you're like, this is who I'm supposed to be. And you're just gonna crush, like you're just gonna do really well when you hit that flow state and you're not distracted by a million things. I think most of us are absolutely distracted by so many things. We feel called to do this, and I think we should do this, and I think we should do this. And we oftentimes are going so fast, we don't slow down to ask, well, what is my calling?
Hmm.
What am I actually like when I check internally, not externally? Not like, oh, I need to do this so I impress these people, or I need to do this so I don't look stupid in front of this one, or whatever. I'm not trying to impress my parents or the guy who said I couldn't, or a teacher who doubted me, or a teacher who believed in me. I'm just like, what truly is what do I feel the best?
Yeah.
Where do I find, where do I find alignment when I do whatever that thing is? I think when you do that and you start stacking years on top of that alignment, it's just very hard not to be successful in those other ways
Yeah.
because people are going to be so attracted to your energy, they're going to be so attracted to your path and to your way of being, um, that they're just like they don't want to look away because you're being honest. And yeah, so I don't know that like the sort of worldly successes. I find a lot of people that pursue those things
Yep.
specifically for those things, and it just seems like they've never got enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they've never got enough validation. They've never got enough and it's far more. I'm like, dude, if I had what you had, I would be. I feel like I would be so happy.
Hmm.
I would be so, I wouldn't be stressed about this or that, but they feel the exact same way. They're just looking up farther ahead. And you will always have somebody, quote unquote, ahead of you and whatever. It's funny because, Mark, jujitsu has blown up in the last 5 years, even in the last 10 years, but specifically the last 5 years, I'm just like, dude, everybody's doing jujitsu. It's crazy.
I want to learn.
Dude, everybody does, and everybody should. There's part of me that's like, when you like a band and
Yep.
they got big, but you liked them before they were big, you're sort of like, you don't even, But
Yep.
the less judgmental and more curious and more celebratory side of me is so stoked because I have said everybody needs to do jujitsu, everyone should do jujitsu, and now that everyone's doing it, I'm sort of like, we need less of you dorks out here. Uh, but Mark Zuckerberg's been doing jujitsu, and I don't know if he's a blue belt, purple belt by now. Obviously he can afford the best teaching and all of the things. But it's been interesting to go like, okay, here's a guy who's got all the things. He's money. He's got more than he could spend if he tried. And just an incredible amount of wealth. Fame, everybody knows who that is. You say his name, people know who he is. Power, absolutely. The dude could, he can move oceans, with his with social influence. It's actually like really incredible, right? And he's learning jujitsu. And he's a blue belt. He was a
Yeah.
white belt. And he's a blue belt. And you go, oh, you're a blue belt. And then I'm like, I want to see you succeed. Let's see how you're doing. And you're watching this guy who's got everything you think you might want, and all he wants is what you've got. And I find that to be a pretty common theme. Um, Pretty common theme. Years ago, Shia LaBeouf was hiking his way through this area, and he was, just out on sort of a spirit quest, which I'm very familiar with. Um, I followed Mike. Posner.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, he did this walk across America, and I met him at the end of it, actually,
Got
in
bit
Los
by a
Angeles.
snake. Almost died.
Yeah, yep, got bit by a rattlesnake. And it was crazy. I met him at the end of that it was the weirdest happenstance. I got on the plane on my way to LA, and the lady's like, "So what takes you to LA?" And I'm like, "I don't know, jump in the water, see a friend. I might tell Mike Posner to keep going because his whole thing on that trip, he just said, keep going." And it was so cool. I just loved it. I didn't even know who he was, like but I found him through that. And I was like, someone actually sent like, "Hey, you should go find this guy." Because I
Hmm.
was traveling. I think that might have been 2017 or 2018, but I was traveling. Um, and then I said that on the plane, obviously not having any plan. And then we randomly went to this yoga studio, and we were going to go one day, and we didn't make it because it was traffic and all the things. So we went the next day, and then I'm in the locker room and I'm changing, and I'm like, "Man, can you wear your shirt in there?" And this dude is like, "Yeah, definitely don't wear your shirt." Or I was like, can you not wear a shirt?"
Oh
So
yeah.
it was hot yoga. It was like 115 in there. I was like, "Dude, it wasn't 115. It was very hot.
Yeah.
The hottest hot yoga I've been to." He's like, "Definitely don't wear." He's like, "Wear as little as you can and do this." And you know, gave me some tips and offered me some like little foot thingies, and um, it was awesome. And then I was like, and then he kind of like kept changing, and I'm like, "Man, I swear I know this guy." And this dude just looks seems super familiar, but I obviously don't know him. I'm not from here, and I met this random yoga studio, and I was like, "Wait, that's Mike Posner." And then I realized it, and then we talked for a while longer, but I didn't want to, blow him up and be like, "Bro." But then I was like, when I went out and he went out, I went out and I was like, "Hey, Mike," and he turned and he's like, "Yo," and I'm like, "Keep going, dude," and I was like, "I got to tell Mike keep going," and he like winked at me. He was like, "Oh, cool, you pay attention." It's like, what up? My life is such a funny thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, wait, so like back to like, what did he want? He accomplished all these things. His friend died. His dad died. Like there is no. I think that when you really break all of that down, um, when you really break it down, like the greatest sin is wanting to become God, right?
Yeah.
Wanting to replace God. And I think that we all have that in us. When you look at the Genesis story, um, that's what they wanted, the knowledge of good and evil. They wanted to become God, to become like God. And I think that when you look at a lot of our actions, with the desire for money, fame, power, all of that, really our actions um, are to be like the root desire there is like we want to become God. And I think like that's a lot of the reason we want to become so strong. That's the reason we want to become powerful. That's the reason we want to become dangerous. We want to be the best everything. And I think it's really important that we recognize that in ourselves and that we humble ourselves and like, dude, you could absolutely nail it. You could become the best human you could ever become, as strong and as fast and as discerning and as wise and all of the things, and you'd be a drop in the ocean, you
Yeah.
know. And most of us are not going to do our best. Like we're going to fail over and over and over again. That's who we are. That's
Yep.
what we are. And so when you let God be God and you let you be faithful, um, you drop a lot of the core of that. You drop a lot of the toxic core of your masculine expression. And so, yeah, I think it's hard to tell people like, well, you want to be God.
Right.
That's why. And it's hard to look in the mirror and go, "You want to be God?" No, I don't. Obviously, I don't want to be God. I'm a man of God. I'm a child of the King, and blah blah blah. Um, and I think, yes, you do. Yes, you do. It's your sickness. You know what I mean? It is what you were born with. It is like that is your being. That is why. you know, that's the whole story. Yes, you do, and that's why you're covered in the blood of the Lamb.
Yep.
You know, so that God, who would destroy you, you know, uh, loves you instead.
Yep.
And I think I think that path is a way to remove the toxic piece from the masculinity piece.
Yep.
And I think that, I mean, maybe even like, we're discovering things here. Maybe that is toxic masculinity. Masculinity is like is in the likeness of God,
Yes.
um, and toxic masculinity is trying to replace him.
Mm.
Which is the intent of that. Which is why that whole conversation with of the Sabbath and honor the Sabbath and Black Sabbath and all of that. For me, I said it's not. I don't believe it's. I don't believe that to be blasphemous. It could be, and someone else might say the exact same thing, and it might be blasphemous. But I just believe that God sees the intent of our heart. He knows it before we know it. He knew it before we had the thought. And I also think that God has the deepest sense of humor that
Yeah.
exists in the universe. So, anyway.
No, you're right. It's the perspective piece. This is what it really comes back down to. I mean, like your whole brand ethos, the peace and the process stuff, joy in the journey, all that. I think that's why what like a big reason why I always related to you and I gravitated to you before, we ever met and stuff, started following you and everything is that's the whole thing is like remembering perspective, remembering that like I don't have to have all the stuff. I don't have to be quote unquote big time successful to be like truly successful. Like I don't have to have all the fame, fortune, and whatnot, but like real success is having the perspective that like, oh no, I'm living a good life and I'm enjoying it and I'm on a path that makes me feel like I'm coming alive in some ways. I think all of that's big, I sort of reassess what that is for me all the time. I think about, I moved out in the van and hung out with you guys for, over a year in 2021. And at that time, my like best path was to go, quote unquote, go live and just be on the road and ride motorcycles with you guys and all that stuff. And it was great. And I actually feel like the Lord told me afterwards that that process after the divorce and everything else was what allowed me to become a more full, I guess, like a less one-dimensional version of myself, right? And and it softened, like the whole process softened me and it made me less. I mean, I used to be angry before, not necessarily at like I wouldn't get angry and aggressive with people, but I'd get angry at myself. I'd get angry at situations and I'd
Yeah.
like sort of blow up on it a little bit. And I mean, honestly, after my divorce, I started to realize like, okay, I have got to change my patterns and change this. And you get perspective. You go through the hell and then you get perspective and you're like, okay, you soften up a bit. And I think that's something to be said of the whole process of, refining gold or pressure creates diamonds, all that. Um, but yeah, man, I guess that's the theme I keep seeing through this entire conversation is the perspective piece, you know, and allowing the process to be the process. I think too often we buck against the process, we buck against the change. Yeah.
Yeah. So on back to hustle culture, and the same thing with, toxic masculinity. I really think, and it's been a theme of me, a theme for me really struck ever since I watched Ted Lasso with Josh. Josh told me, he's like, dude, you know Ted Lasso? And I was like, no, what's that? He's like, oh, dude, he's just like you. This guy is like, it's like you, and like, you got to watch it. Everything about him reminds me of you. I'm like, all right. So I'm expecting that I'm going to look up like this badass, good looking, you know, tough guy, cool guy. And then there he is, Ted Lasso, dude, and all in the flesh. And I'm like, soccer coach? Like the dorky soccer coach? That's me. And then he started inviting me, and it was really good for Josh and I because we just didn't hang out a ton. We kind of after I got divorced, like we hung out for a while. Like he helped me. He was there for me and it meant the world and will always mean the world. And then after that, I just was so sort of disenfranchised with the hustle culture piece, with the, like building business, like things that he was and is and has been passionate about, that I just like, man, I just don't find that bucket is full at all for me anymore. I just,
Hmm.
you know, but it was great for us to hang out and sort of, sort of honestly reconnect around this Ted Lasso show. But there's a scene in there, um, which I reference often, think about constantly. Uh, where he's playing darts. You know the scene? You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm.
Ever seen Ted Lasso?
I don't think I have.
Dude, you gotta watch Ted Lasso.
Noted.
If you like my brain and my heart and the way I see the world, the writers of Ted Lasso nail it really, really well.
Noted.
Anyway, there's a scene in there where Rupert, I think is the guy's name, and he's the rich, super successful, blah blah blah, and just your classic like I don't know, your classic like just pompous, arrogant,
Hmm.
successful, rich guy, narcissist, all the things. Like he's back and he's at this thing and he's just there to bother Rebecca, his ex, because she ended up inheriting the football club.
Yep.
So they call it football clubs in the UK. Um, but he's basically just there, like to show off and to harass. And so he's shooting some darts, and then Ted goes over there and he's like, hey, he's like basically like, hey, if I beat you at a game of darts, will you basically stop bothering Rebecca? How about that? And he does it really respectful. And Rupert's kind of like, you beat me at darts, dude. You're a dork, who it sucks as a coach and whatever.
Yep.
And then he's like, you're on. And then he gives this talk as he's throwing his darts. He throws. So Rupert throws, and he crushes. They're all real good shots. And then he goes, what do I need to win? And the bartender goes, you need, two bullseyes and a three or whatever. Basically, really hard shots to make. And he goes, Rupert, I've been dealing with guys like you my whole life. And a lot of them didn't like me. I couldn't figure out why. And I realized that they were judgmental and not curious. And I knew that you were that type, because if you were curious, you would have said, hey, uh, Ted, do you ever play darts? And then I would have told you, yeah, when I was 5 years old, all the way till I was a, young man, I went every single Sunday, spent the whole day just throwing darts by myself. So yeah. And, and then he beats him, right? He like beats him. He's like, boom. He's like, but you're not curious. You're judgmental. And that piece for me is just, that theme for me has just stuck. And I think, when you approach the toxic masculinity, and I feel like for you, there's a defensive piece in there where you're trying to defend masculinity because
Hmm.
you like lifting weights and you like being strong and you like all of these things. So people go toxic masculinity, and you go, well, you don't understand. I'm not toxic. I'm masculine, and
Hmm.
there's a nuance there. And I think a lot of people approach that with judgment, not curiosity. And that's the trouble with it, right? They don't look to the heart's intent. They look at like, oh, you said honor the Sabbath. You're being blasphemous. But the way that God sees that, the way that I believe God sees that, is straight to the heart of it,
Hmm.
right? Straight to the core of my intention. He knows, and that's the thing. Is like even when you go do a beautiful thing, which a lot of people, you see on the internet constantly, these people who are out like, hey, I'm gonna go out and help the homeless. I'm gonna give you $10,000 today and whatever. And I was like, bro, that's not what Jesus was out doing. Like filming it to go, yeah, dude, look at me, dude, I'm freaking sick.
Yep. Pray in the closet.
And and I think uh God can see right through the intent of that too. So they're like, hey, that's a beautiful thing you just did. You wouldn't bless somebody with service, but I see right through the heart. You're sinful in your heart, and I think we all are at some level, for everything that we do. And I just think it's really important to go, am I looking at this with judgment or curiosity? Am I starting rooting in love, or am I starting rooting in fear? And I think the root of fear is judgment. And I think the root of love is curiosity. And I think so when you look at toxic masculinity, you can't look at something and go, that's toxic masculinity. You need to be curious and go be like, hey,
Yep.
I see the show of strength. What's the heart behind the show of strength, right?
Yeah.
And the same is true of hustle culture. I know a lot of guys who are really healthy, awesome guys that I sometimes struggle with because I'm like, no, they have there has to be something wrong. They got
Mm.
to have a flaw somewhere. This dude is, he's 6'3", super handsome, drives a Ferrari, owns this big house, has another house over here, and he doesn't even seem like he works. Certainly, he's got to beat his wife. He's got to be a bad dad. And I hate that
Yeah.
about myself. That is me being judgmental. That's me not being curious. That's me being insecure. That's me being, and I go, I bet I could beat him in a fight,
Mm.
right? That's toxic masculinity. Absolutely toxic masculinity. And it's me,
Yep.
right? And so it's not like a big paintbrush. It's nuanced and it's
Yeah.
it's a real thing. But the toxicity is where you're rooting. Are you rooting in love? Are you rooting in judgment? Are you rooting in fear,
Yep.
or rooting in love and curiosity? And so I think the hustle culture is the same piece, right? Some people, they're called to work hard. They love to build. They love to, and they make money and they're good stewards of it, right? And I think that and I think that's the thing is we don't own anything.
Yeah.
We don't own this stuff. We are stewards of everything we're blessed to have, of our time, of our possessions, of our resource. And money's just that's all it is. It's a representative of it's a representation of resource.
Yes.
And my insecurity is sometimes when I see someone with a ton of money, I go, I got to be better. How do I make myself in my head better than you? And then when I have that experience, I realize that the people who curse me, they're doing the same thing. They just want what I have, or at least they think they want what I have. Um, but I really believe, again, that success isn't money, fame, power. It's when we are in alignment with our calling. And I think we all have a unique calling, and we stop asking externally what we're supposed to be doing, and we start asking internally, which is I believe where prayer happens. Um, we can figure out
Yeah.
what the calling is, and we can start getting in alignment with it, and stop getting out of alignment by trying to align ourselves with things that we're not called to be.
Yeah.
And that whole you don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree thing. There are a lot of fish out there trying to freaking get up the tree, just suffocating on the air. And they go, I suck. I can't climb this tree. I can't breathe.
Yep.
My skills are drying out. And it's like, bro, you should be in the water. You should see yourself in the water. You and that gorilla jump in the water, and we'll see which one's the freaking master, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That's yeah, I love it. It is all about that perspective. One of the things that I've said a couple times, and I'm the more I say it, the more I'm like, I think this might be absolutely true. I mean, it makes sense to me. But we have this idea that people that are quote unquote in that worldly success, like fame, fortune, whatever, that they must have some semblance of excellence, or it takes that type of excellence to get there. But something that I realized observing people that are in those positions is that excellence, quote unquote, void of the fruits of the spirit. So love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control is all it's actually vanity. It's not excellence at all, in my opinion. So, you know, when you look at the people and you're going, oh, well, there must be something wrong with them, kind of go, okay, but are they, are they aggressive with their employees, or are they understanding? Are they, loving people well? Are they, generous and all the things? That's kind of how I try to approach it, I guess, is okay, either way, I don't want to be judging just anybody, but sometimes I look at people and they're like, yeah, we're a Christian business, and I'm going, yeah, but you're not living by the fruits at all. So it's just a lot of nuance and a lot of perspective, things to think about sometimes.
Yeah, I think when you break it down to just I think a lot of people find that walking in faith or they chuck religion, they chuck spirituality, they chuck any of this out because it's too hard to understand. Well, what am I supposed to do? And they think they got to go read an entire book to understand the rules so that they can follow them, which is just such a backwards thought and demotivating thought. I think when you think like Christ, Christian, Christ follower, and that whole like, how do I emulate? What would Jesus do here? And how do I do my best to follow that lead? And I don't think Jesus looked at people and was like, "There got to be something wrong with you," right?
Yep.
I think he looked and he was like, "I know what's wrong with you,
Yep.
and there are things right with you, and I can cover the things that are wrong with you." And I think when we get that thing, like, hey, it's not something you did. It's not that you did it and you earned it and you were good enough. It's that someone showed up and they freaking covered your tab.
Yep.
Whatever the gap is, covered without a problem. And when you think about that, when you think about like, hey, someone just showed up, you're struggling to make your house payment. Someone showed up and paid off the whole house. And you go, the feeling there, the feeling of care, even if you just run that simulation in your head, you go, what? Someone just paid off my house. I don't have a house payment anymore, you know? And imagine that times infinity. Bless you. Imagine that times infinity, um, literally.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what you would do is that the reaction would be like, well, what can I do for them? You know, what
Yep.
can I do for them? And then essentially, well, nothing, dude. They've got it all, right? But they do want your heart. They
Yep.
do want your love, and they do want you to live the best way that you can live. And they've got ideas on what that looks like. And you go, well, I'm willing to listen. Someone who would love me that much, who would be that kind to me, who would be, show me that level of grace. I'm interested to know what they have to say. And that's how it works, not the other way around. And so when you go like, well, what would Christ do in this situation? And if we could do that over and in the same way that I have to start learning to fix my posture and stand here and not look down and all the things, if
Mhm.
we could start checking ourselves as often as we can and go, what would you just do in this situation? What would you just do in this situation? Not so that we can be like, yeah, I will be Jesus, because you're gonna, you can hold yourself to that standard, but more so like, hey, I have modeled behavior. I have someone who I believe, or at least you can, I encourage anybody to run it and be like, go read the red text in the book and go, what did this look like? What was this guy all about? What did he do in this situation, in that situation? What types of things did he say? Um, and I bet you like that's dope. I bet you don't find a whole lot of things where you go, oh, I thought he was this, um, you know, he was this white prick from the suburbs. I just don't think you're gonna you
Yeah.
won't find, and you'll find someone to follow, and I bet you'll find a lot more alignment in how you're living. And I think I see it happen constantly. I see people who didn't care about their health who are moving to care about their health. They didn't care about what they ate, and they're moving to care about what they're eating. They were angry at masculinity, and now they're asking for more of it. They were angry at what a lot of people were angry about what they were told femininity was supposed to be, and now they're interested in more of that. And I think this is all good. I think that it's important to test and learn. I think that's what I've done my whole life. I go poke this and prod this, and I say honor the Sabbath just to be like, somebody come at me. I want to have a discussion. And a lot of those discussions, I end up being like, I was wrong. Even in that one, I was like, the heart of this was testing. The heart of this was like, it was to be funny, probably 80%, but there was a good percentage in there and um, John Piper, do you know John Piper?
Yep.
John Piper has a quote. He said, I doubt I've ever had a thought so pure that it didn't have some sin in it.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that and you believe it, like, yeah, dude, that's what I am, dude. I'm sick, but I'm good. I'm covered.
Yep.
You know, um, then it's hard not to be faithful. It's hard not to be curious. It's hard not to want to do better and be better and act better. And I think so. So like, I guess sort of to kind of wrap, um, they do got to go see Mr. Cody, but who's playing tonight at the HF bar at 9 o'clock, by the way.
This
The
won't release that fast, but noted.
Dang it. Well, he catches boxing classes at the pawn shop on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Sure
Dude,
is
the fact
mine.
Mr. Cody has Mr. Cody's boxing in the back of a pawn shop
Oh yeah.
on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he teaches boxing back there, is just America to me, dude. It makes me so happy.
Yeah.
And I'm sad that one day he's not going to be around anymore, you know? But like, just like, I'm like, dude, boxing club in the back of a pawn shop. And then at night, he's out there playing his guitar, singing out at a bar in the middle of nowhere. It's like what I thought life was going to be like. When I was growing up in Wyoming, I remember going to this dance party after whatever, like at night. There was like boots everywhere, and cowboy hats everywhere, and everybody's dressed like everyone's dressing now. It's it's funny like now cowboy is so in, right? But like everybody's dressed like that, and it was the '90s, so it was just '90s country, Alan Jackson and Travis Tritt, and everybody's dancing and flipping each other around and spinning around, and I was like, huh, this is kind of weird, but it's cool that this happens. And I have that, and I'm pretty sure actually it was at the HF bar. I haven't been there, and I don't even know if I've ever been there, but in my head, I'm pretty sure that's where this scene came from. Anyway, he's playing there tonight. I got to go chat with him. But to sort of wrap it up, I think like when you're talking about toxic masculinity, because a lot of times we do this thing where we become binary and go, I'm going to be on this side or I'm going to be on that side, right? And that's not great for us because things are nuanced and dialectics is a thing. But I think that anytime when you define the thing, there's a quote that said like as soon as you tell a kid what bird that is, he'll never see the bird again.
Hmm.
And I think that is true in a lot of things. You go, well, that's toxic masculinity. Like, oh yeah, we'll just stop right there. We got a label for it, and we're good, right? It's one of the things actually I loved about Glenn Hall, who was my OG jiu-jitsu teacher. He didn't name anything. It drove me crazy. When I started learning, I was really into 10th Planet, which had all these crazy names for every single thing. They had zombie control and crackhead control and dead orchard and like all these cool metal names for all the positions. And he wouldn't name positions. And what was cool about that is you didn't go, well, this is this position and this is how it works and here's the right way to do it. And anything beyond that is the wrong way. Because it's much less of a math equation, much more of a paintbrush to me, jiu-jitsu is. But anyway, all that said, I think that when we look at those things, when we look at hostile culture, when we look at toxic masculinity, when you look at anything, you look at conservatism or liberalism, and when we look at that thing and we go, I'm curious. Let me ask 3 questions, right? Let me start with curiosity. Man, I just think we would cut through so much. We'd find each other. We'd find, that we are amongst our peers, and the vision is divisive. It's intentional. It's not. It doesn't bear fruit. It puts to death connection. Which is from love and in love. So anybody who's listened this far, which thank you. I don't know how long we just chatted, hour and 10 minutes. But anyone who's listened this far, I just encourage you, whatever that thing is that kind of upsets you or, gets you going, whatever, I really encourage you to, in this case, like you're not Jesus, so you can't be like Jesus, who knows, right? Who already knows the heart of what people are doing. But the way that we can emulate and the way that we can be a good follower, is that we can try to know, we can try to learn, and we can root ourselves in love. We can say that love's other name is understanding, and we can pursue understanding through curiosity, through asking people.
Mm-hmm.
And you might find that hustle culture in this case is toxic, and you might find that masculinity in this expression is toxic. And you might find that it's not at all. And maybe the toxicity was in you. And that will be the coolest thing ever, because you'll go, oh, cool, let me clear out the mold that's been causing me to not be able to breathe. I haven't been able to, run a 6-minute mile, like the, whatever that thing is for you, because I haven't been able to breathe. And I'm putting in all the work, but I can't breathe because I got this mold in my heart. Yep. Aren't you the more you can hold up a mirror or let the world hold up a mirror for you, and you can see in you and you can become better, life just gets cooler. You get closer to alignment. I hope that when I'm old and my spine is completely deteriorated, which might not be. I just had an MRI, if nobody knew that. They told me, dude, you got some problems, which is just par for the course to the way I live. But when I'm old and I can't move and I'm like, ouch, I hope I have a smile on my face because I've got to get rid of all the mold inside, or a lot of the mold inside me. Yep. I recognize myself as like, I stopped trying to root myself in strength and value in what I have to offer, but just in my being and being a child of eternity.
Yeah. And that's why this podcast exists, is to explore the nuance of everything, whether it be something like this, whether it be cultural context, whether it be political context, or whether it be, what does the Bible say and why does it say it? What's the cultural context? What is the idea that they had back in 0 AD, so yeah, man, thanks for coming on, thanks for being a part of the podcast. Love you, dude. You're always welcome, man, and I'm stoked to keep running with you in life, man. So thanks for joining. I'll link all your stuff in the description if anybody isn't already following you, but they probably know who you are if they listen to me. So
I love you back, dude. I'm excited for you to become a dad and keep running this stuff with whatever comes out of there.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's fun. Very soon. So, all right. Well, thanks, guys, for listening. Thanks for checking out the podcast. If you'd share it, that'd be great. I'm trying to spend less time on social media, so not that the algorithms work very well. But anyways, catch you on the next one. Peace.